Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Glow Up Guide podcast. So, today we are going to be going on a deep dive into procrastination. We are all guilty of putting off important tasks up until the very last minute and then scrambling to get everything done. But what if we didn't have to rush so much? What if we could get everything done early? That would be great, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking all about today. So before we go any further, let's do podcast updates and life updates. So for podcast updates, yeah, I've been gone for like a month. But I've been like doing stuff. Obviously I've been like really busy. So yeah, but I'm finally getting back on track. I've made an Instagram post today and I'm gonna post it today after I'm done with this episode. So that's an accomplishment for me. I'm gonna be posting something in I think over a year. Yeah, I'm really trying to like get back on track with this podcast, especially because I do want to have it monetized by the start of 2028, I think. Yeah, definitely start of 2028. So I gave myself 2 years. My New Year's resolution this year was to get this podcast monetized within the next 2 years, and I really think I can make that happen. So yeah, we're focusing on getting back on track right now. And then for life updates, let's see. Not too much has been going on. Well, I mean, by not too much, I mean there's been stuff going on, obviously, like school and track and that type of thing, but like nothing big, if that makes sense. Just like the mundane daily life things, I guess. So the big things that have happened in the past, 3-4 weeks, for FBLA. So basically, business competition, pretty much. And I ended up placing third at regionals. So that's a big accomplishment for me. That's one of the things I was so busy with. And then I had a track meet not last Saturday, but the one before, so the 21st. And I hit another PR, so 7:16 on the mile. So we're working on breaking 7 by the end of the season. That was another New Year's resolution I had. What else? Oh, yes, I was selected as a finalist for a poetry contest I applied to. There are 12 finalists and 3 top prizes. I highly doubt I will win anything, but it's still exciting. So, yeah. And then yesterday I went to my friend's housewarming and I saw her after a long time, so that was fun. And it's spring break this week, so that's that. All right. Before moving on, let's do one thing we're grateful for and one thing we're happy about, plus our book of the week. One thing I'm grateful for is that it's starting to get warmer outside. The first day of spring was like a week ago, I think. So that's exciting. But like the weather has been kind of bipolar, honestly. There was a tornado warning, which means there was actually a tornado in the area somewhere. Maybe last week, I want to say. Yeah, I think it was last week. Last week or the week before. One of those. But yeah. So we were stuck in class for like an hour and like we were just freaking out. Honestly, like everyone was on their phones and stuff. No one really cared. It was great. um, so there was that. And then it's been like really hot and really cold, like 2 weeks ago maybe. We had our inter squad meet for track. So basically, our entire track team was split into multiple teams, and we all had to compete against each other. It was really fun. But the first day, everyone was in like shorts and tank tops, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, it's so hot!" And then the second day comes around, and we're all wearing like full sweats, multiple layers, jackets, and we're so freezing. And I'm like, genuinely, how did that happen in the span of 2 days? Um, so the weather's been interesting, and it's great. I mean, it's warm one day, and then it's freezing the next, but here we are. And also, everyone's getting sick, and I'm like 80%. Actually, no, we all know it's because of that. But yeah, still, I'm really grateful that spring is coming, and it's not gonna be that. I'm not gonna be like my hands aren't gonna go numb when I run anymore, so that's good. And then one thing I'm happy about is spring break. I don't have to put up with school for a week. So I'm very happy about that. And honestly, I'm just like catching up on life over spring break. There's a lot of stuff that I'm kind of behind on, but I have the rest of this week to catch up on it, so that's good. And I'm happy about that. Okay, so our book of the week, I actually do have one. I read a book for the first time in literal months. It's insane. But I read The Intruder by Frida McFadden. So basically, it's a book about this girl, Casey, or this woman, Casey. So she lives in a cabin in the wilderness, and there's a hurricane coming. So it's a very old cabin, and yeah, it's kind of going haywire. So she discovers a girl in her tool shed, who is young, alone, and covered in blood, and the girl refuses to explain where she came from or loosen the grip on her knife. So, when Casey makes a disturbing discovery in the middle of the night, things take a turn for the worse. The girl has a dark secret, one that she'll kill to keep, and if Casey gets too close to the truth, she may not live to see the morning. So it was a really good book. The plot twist is insane. So if you love like plot twists, I would definitely recommend you read it. Like, yeah, it was great. But overall, really good book. Okay, so let's move on to the actual episode. So first off, I wanted to talk about understanding procrastination beyond the fact that it means putting things off until most of the time the very last minute. We have all found ourselves saying just one more episode or just 10 more minutes and then I'll get right back to work. And then we never end up going back to work, and before we know it, it's 4 a.m, and we have to wake up and somehow be completely functional human beings in a couple hours. This is exactly the core of procrastination, an unfortunately familiar enemy to many of us. At its core, procrastination is the act of delaying or postponing even like the really important tasks to a later time or date, despite knowing and likely understanding that doing so could have very negative consequences. It's also, unfortunately, a very common behavior that we have all fallen victim to at some point or another. Heck, I've been procrastinating this episode about procrastination for long enough at this point. But the real question is, why do we do it? Why do we procrastinate? Most people seem to think that it's about poor time management, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Psychologists and recent studies are beginning to show that procrastination isn't so much about poor time management skills or a lack of those skills, but rather about managing your emotions. It's not that we don't have enough time, it's that we're trying to manage negative feelings associated with the task that needs to be done. Procrastination almost serves as a coping mechanism to deal with the difficult emotions of difficult tasks. Most of the time, we procrastinate on the things that make us feel anxious, the things that make us feel afraid of failing, or when we are perfectionists who fear not being able to do tasks with utmost perfection. Fear of failure, namely, is a big one. So many people are so scared that they will mess up badly on a task, so they just put it off forever and forever and let it eat up their souls. But that fear is paralyzing. It's intended to be some illusion of a protective mechanism, at least that's how our minds seem to see it, but it comes at the cost of our productivity and oftentimes also our personal growth. And that really sucks. Perfectionism also kind of ties into this a little bit. Perfectionists tend to procrastinate not because they are lazy, but because they are afraid that their work won't be like super duper perfect. They can't handle completing anything less than absolute perfection. The pressure that perfectionists put on themselves to be so perfect stresses them out so much to the point where it's just easier to avoid the now daunting task altogether. Yet it is this quest for perfection that seems to lead to even poorer outcomes. Procrastinating these tasks limits the time available to produce high quality work that these perfectionists expect of themselves. It's really counterproductive. These are the kinds of feelings that cause us to procrastinate even the most important tasks, and it's surprising to think it's not about time management, but rather emotional management. So, the neuroscience part behind procrastination is actually pretty interesting. There are two main parts of our brain that are involved in this whole procrastination process, let's call it that. There's the prefrontal cortex at the front of our brain, which is responsible for our decision-making, planning, and self-control. Pretty much the reasoning, logical part of our brains. It's the rational thinking part that knows we should all be working on that project or going to the gym soon. However, there's also the other part of our brain called the limbic system. These two parts are often battling inside. The limbic system is the part of our brain that seeks immediate pleasure and satisfaction. Pretty much the part that would rather binge watch a show and eat cookies rather than go to the gym or study. This interesting conflict can lead to procrastination when the limbic system often wins because this pleasure is far more favorable and overrides our prefrontal cortex's attempts at discipline and self-control. But why did this battle even happen? That connects back to dopamine, the happiness and satisfaction hormone. It's commonly associated with feelings of pleasure and reward and actually plays a pretty significant role here. The tasks that provide us with immediate gratification are the ones that increase dopamine levels the most and the fastest. The fastest part being the important part, making these tasks more rewarding and appealing than those with delayed rewards, like long-term projects or difficult goals. Our brain's reward system is also connected to dopamine. Our reward system always wants dopamine, and it wants the dopamine quick. It doesn't like to wait. When you just keep on procrastinating in favor of doing other things to avoid those uncomfy feelings, that is how your brain will eventually tie procrastination to getting dopamine and get a false sense of feeling good. But it's only a short-term thing until the deadline rolls around and we are completely going bonkers, stressed out of our minds. Once we understand this internal battle, we can finally start to view procrastination as not simply a lack of willpower, but also a result of the way our brains are wired and how it functions. This perspective not only helps in reducing the self-blame associated with procrastination, but also opens up pathways for strategies that can enhance the prefrontal cortex's function. Strengthening this function can really help this internal battle and in turn make us less likely to procrastinate various tasks. Another interesting thing that sort of ties into the psychology behind procrastination, is that there are countless different types of procrastinators who all procrastinate in very different ways. For example, we have the thrill seekers who purposely wait until the very last minute to start a task because that impending deadline is the only thing that will get them to do their work. They love that adrenaline rush they get from working against the clock. While this can sometimes lead to really impressive last-minute work being done, it's quite risky and a pretty stressful strategy. These thrill seekers often significantly underestimate the amount of time various tasks will take, and this can lead to extremely rushed work and potential burnout. They tend to think that waiting until the last minute and fighting for their lives against the clock is really the only way to get things done. And sure, sometimes this can be very true for a lot of people. There are always exceptions. It's just that this type of work approach isn't what most people are going for because, like I said, it can lead to burnout and exhaustion. However, most people are trying to avoid this type of last-minute rush, or at least I'm assuming that's the reason you clicked on this episode. Personally, this is kind of the approach I take towards my art projects. So, long story short, I'm an art student. And the thing with me is that I do have artistic ability. I will say that. It's just that it takes me a month and starting over 3 or 4 times to actually produce something I can call a good piece of art. And the way a standard high school art class functions simply does not support that. So it's a bit of a struggle for me. I have a tendency to wait until the last of the 3 extra school days we legally have to submit assignments, and I'm normally up until midnight that day working on this art project. I quite literally submitted an assignment at 11:59 p.m. on the dot one time, and I hate this, but fighting for my life against the clock is the only way to get myself to do my art. And I think this is relatable to a lot of people who may find themselves in this thrill seeker category of procrastinators. Next up, we have the avoider. Avoiders tend to frequently procrastinate out of a fear of failure, or oddly enough, sometimes a fear of success. They often worry about the consequences of failing or how success might change their lives. Fear of failure is common, yes, but fearing success can also play a role in how you view procrastination. I'm honestly sometimes scared to turn in assignments that are done. Yes, they're done, but I know I did poorly on because then my grade's going to drop. So it's a twisted up definition of fearing success in some way, but it's still valid in my opinion. It seems really interesting and really odd, but this actually might just be you and you don't even realize it at first. Avoiders also often struggle with handling imposter syndrome, fearing that they don't deserve success or just aren't capable of achieving their goals. We are all guilty of this. Oh, well, I don't really deserve it, do I? There's always that nagging voice in the back of our minds telling us that we are not good enough or we shouldn't have X, Y, and Z because we haven't done anything to earn it. Truth is, yes, you did earn it, and that's a truth that a lot of avoiders can't really get into their heads and learn to accept. This leads them to avoid starting tasks, as not trying at all feels safer than risking failures or confronting their success. But that could not be further from the truth. Sure, I turn my things in late and take the C, but yeah, it's better than a 0. That's something I learned the very, very hard way. It's not great, but it's something. Avoiders can't really understand that thing, though. They seem to think, well, if I just skirt around doing it and never have to do it and never have to accept whatever positive or negative fate that may come along with it. And that could not be further from the truth. Then there's the perfectionist, and this is a category a lot of you guys can likely fall into. I have met a lot of perfectionists in my life. Some of my very close friends were or are perfectionists. I have had my fair share of experience with perfectionists. You know, when you see like type A versus type B on social media, they're 1000% that online definition of type A. Perfectionists can't handle seemingly simple daily tasks, not because they are incompetent, but rather because they are never ever satisfied with something that's just good enough. No, in their eyes, it must be perfect or it's a complete disaster of a flop. Their high standards and fear of producing anything less than absolutely perfect work paralyzes them into just avoiding the task itself. because avoidance is just easier in the moment. But our brain can make a lot of impulsive choices, and this just so happens to be one of them. Avoiding things due to a fear of lacking absolute perfection is not the way to go. Honestly, when you set such a high bar for yourself that it reaches the stars, it becomes very hard to actually meet that. Plus, people who naturally set such high expectations of themselves always tend to think that they could have done so much better no matter how well they do. Not saying that high standards shouldn't be there. Having high expectations of yourself is what brings a lot of people success, but it goes to a certain point. When a fear of nothing less than absolute perfectionism begins to paralyze you, that's when you really need to start thinking about what's going on with you. This type of procrastinator will often spend way too much time focusing on minor details, making it practically impossible to complete tasks efficiently. I have a tendency to do this when I'm working on any of my scholarship applications. Did I even use the commas right? How much of the space should there be? I swear there's a grammar mistake in there I can't see. There's always something in there. And that just proves that perfectionism goes to an extent. Don't let that be the reason you become stuck. Then there's the decisional procrastinator. I guess a lot of you can relate to this if you commonly experience decision fatigue. It's a common experience though. Decisional procrastinators often delay making decisions because they are afraid of making the wrong choice. And it's not only the huge life-changing decisions either, it's also the tiny decisions like when to wash your hair or what to eat for breakfast, or when to go out and get the stupid groceries. It seems so silly and so unreasonable, but these decisional procrastinators don't view it like that. So in their view, by just choosing not to make any sort of decision, they at least temporarily avoid being responsible for the potential positive or negative outcome of their choices. The thing is, though, we can't predict what the future holds. Sure, it would be really nice if we could, but we can't. This type of not being able to decide often means that you want the best for yourself, and that's good, but everything goes to an extent. If this fear of making the wrong choice is paralyzing you so much, then is it really the right choice you're making for yourself? That's something to think about that may lead to even more indecisiveness. See my point? This type of fearing decisions can lead decisional procrastinators to feel stuck, and then they just can't do anything, missing out on opportunities. Then there's the one a lot of us, including myself nearly every single day, can relate to, and that's the overwhelmed procrastinator. The overwhelmed procrastinator puts off things on their to-do list until the very last minute, often because the mere idea of thinking about starting the task causes them to freak out and just completely avoid doing the task. Then it never gets done. Or they just don't want to do it because there are other things they would rather be doing. Like I said, this is what happens to me just about every single day. As you all know, I'm a very busy person. Sure, I complain about it. I complain about it a lot, but I really wouldn't have it any other way. I hate free time. I just never know what to do with it. So I like my weirdly chaotic lifestyle that would give most people I know a heart attack. But with this lifestyle comes a never-ending to-do list, and I'm being so serious about it. It literally never, ever ends. But that's true for a lot of people. I have friends who always ask me what I'm working on now, and there's always something. I forgot to study for a test. I have an assignment due. There's something for a club, scholarship applications, and research, personal projects. There's always something going on in my life, and there's always something that needs to be done. Right now, right off the top of my head, the things that I'm doing are obviously school. I have a handful of huge events coming up for one of the clubs I'm in. I have track. I'm entering a research competition. I'm working on stuff to launch my blog over the summer. I am working on scholarship applications. So there's just a never-ending to-do list. And I have a tendency to look at the to-do list and then my brain freaks out and just thinking about doing work makes me want to cry or throw up or spontaneously combust. So this is an almost daily occurrence for me. And likely a lot of other people. But I also feel like this one is pretty common, or at least it's common for me in my day-to-day life. Then there's the busy procrastinator, and this type of procrastinator often avoids doing certain tasks by doing other tasks instead. Warning, this is the most dangerous type of procrastination out there, for sure. I do this nearly every day with my school assignments. If I don't want to study for my English quiz, I do my history notes instead. If I don't want to do the laundry, I'll clean my desk. If I don't want to work on my art project, I will overanalyze my English essay. And case in point, it is very common. Likely the one nearly everyone can relate to from all the types I've gone over in the past little bit of this episode. Busy procrastinators tend to avoid doing certain tasks by just doing other tasks. They do something else to trick themselves into thinking that they're actually being productive when in reality they are not being all that productive. This is merely a very common and highly deceiving illusion of productivity, and likely the most dangerous form of procrastination just because of that one thing. It's all an illusion. And a very deceiving one, too. It is so incredibly easy to do so, and that's why we all do this. This one is also the hardest type of procrastination to tackle because it's so normalized and kind of invisible to most. It's not really seen as procrastination. But eventually it gets to a certain point and just starts to become kind of problematic. After hearing all this, one might have really resonated with you, or you might feel that you are a combination of 2 to 3 of these different types, or maybe all of them. I'm a combination of all of them for sure. It just depends on the situation. But that's perfectly okay. Identifying your procrastination style is the first step to actually doing anything to tackle this procrastination. There's different steps you can take based on what type of procrastinator you are. The key here is to better understand your habits and tackle them with tailored strategies. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the procrastination mindset. Literally everything these days is a mindset, and procrastination is no exception. Tackling procrastination is not only about what we do, but also how we think and behave. Your mind and your thoughts hold extremely valuable power, and it's important to make sure you put that power to your advantage and growth instead of your disadvantage and downfall. Our mindset affects just about everything we do and every single thing in our daily lives. It also influences procrastination. Procrastination often stems from a fear of failure, desire for nothing but absolute perfection, or just being overwhelmed by the seemingly never-ending to-do list. It's a false protective mechanism at best. All of those things are ingrained in our mindset. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if we could shift our mindset to go from wanting to get things done instead of just putting them off and doing other things and being lazy and unproductive? Imagine being able to look at your to-do list and not seeing a never-ending list of pointless tasks to get done, but rather so many opportunities for growth and learning experiences. Just imagine what that would feel like. Imagine how much you would be able to get done. Imagine how confident and motivated and how good you would feel about yourself if you were able to shift your mindset to view your to-do list as opportunities for growth. It would be absolutely amazing. Possibly life-changing, but that could be a bit of a stretch. But by simply and also not simply reframing our mindset and views on procrastination, we can make a huge difference in whether we win or lose the battle between doom scrolling some more or doing whatever the thing is that you were supposed to do. Moving on to the third and final major section, which is probably the one you all have been waiting for, we're going to dive into exactly how we handle and defeat procrastination. So we've all talked about this stuff related to understanding procrastination, how it works, why we do it, types of procrastinators, etc., etc. I would really hope you actually understand procrastination by now, so how do we actually manage it? My first major tip to beating procrastination is getting rid of any and all possible distractions and completely banishing them from your workspace whenever you're trying to get your work done. Distractions of any kind are the biggest and fastest way to kill your momentum to actually do stuff, especially when the task at hand is already difficult. The second your brain decides it sees a much easier way out of actually finishing the task, it's going to take that chance and you won't end up actually getting anything done. So before you start any work at all, kill the distractions immediately. The big one is phones or really any unrelated technology. Technology is great, sure, but it's also a huge motivation killer when we end up scrolling for 2 hours because that was just so much easier than studying for 2 hours. So if you don't really and direly need your phone or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, put it in another room, or if you live in a space with multiple floors, put it on a different floor. It's such a small and simple thing you can do, yet it makes such a big difference. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. That's honestly how I gave up sugar. Another one, if you are a student like me and work in your room often, do not keep a TV in there under zero circumstances. Well, sure, there are always exceptions, but I highly doubt there are many with this one unless you live in a literal shoebox apartment, which is very possible, actually. But yeah, if you have a TV in your room, move it, sell it, do whatever the heck you want with it, just get it out of that room. That TV is, again, a huge motivation killer because it's so much easier to watch TV instead of doing, productive stuff. Case in point, if you actually want to get stuff done, kill the distractions before you do anything else. Kill those distractions. Next thing that kind of continues off of what I just said is installing site blockers or app blockers. Since I do just about all of my work on my school computer, literally everything not related to school is already blocked, which, yeah, it can sometimes suck, but it's honestly a good thing. Because then there's not really much else to do for me besides my work. But I also know that there are website blocker extensions you can install to your device. And you can set it up to block certain sites and such for a certain time period. And if you can't go on these unproductive sites, you're left with no other option but to do your work. Same goes for your phone. There are apps that allow you to block other apps for a certain period of time. They function the same as site blockers. So if you can't go on these other apps, again, you're left with no other option but to do your work. There are also apps that don't necessarily block other apps, but they delay the time which they take to load by about 10 seconds. And believe me when I say those 10 seconds can make a huge difference in whether you doom scroll or do your work. Whenever Netflix takes longer than its usual few seconds to load, I tend to essentially give up. The human brain works in interesting ways, and 10 seconds is actually really all it takes. The key here is to make it as hard as possible to avoid doing your work and as easy as possible as you can to do your work. And those simple things really do make a huge difference. So tip number 3 is making yourself do whatever it is for just 1 minute. It sounds really stupid and absolutely ridiculous, but just hear me out for a moment. All you have to do is force yourself to do the task at hand for 1 minute. Not 10 minutes, not an hour, not forcing yourself to get it done completely. Just one singular minute. Anyone can force themselves to do literally anything for 1 minute, right? I mean, I know you can. When you tell yourself you're going to do the task at hand for just 1 minute, it sounds so stupidly easy that it becomes really motivating and honestly really hard to just keep avoiding the task. Then, after the minute is up, you have already built up enough momentum to just keep going, and you'll often forget that you told yourself originally that you would only work for a minute. A minute is really all it takes to make such a huge difference. This is something I use nearly every day, and every single time I always forget that I was only intending to work for a minute. Because once you build that needed momentum, stopping actually becomes harder than continuing. Like I said, you just have to make it really insanely easy for yourself to do your work, and this tip does exactly that. In my opinion, after banishing distractions, this might be the most effective experience bag tip I have to share with you guys. If you take away one tip from this episode after banning distractions, it's this one. Honestly, you can try it right now and see exactly what I'm talking about. Alright, so tip number 4 is the Pomodoro method. This isn't one that has ever personally worked for me, but it seems to work for a lot of people. So it's pretty common, and I would be kind of surprised if you haven't already heard about the Pomodoro method, but basically it's you divide up your session of doing work into working chunks and break chunks that optimize productivity for everyone besides me. What you do is set a 25-minute timer. Then you do hyper-focused, distraction-free work for 25 minutes. And then there's a 5-minute break. The cycle of 25 minutes work and 5 minutes break repeats 4 times, except on the fourth cycle, you take a longer 15-minute break. You just keep on going until you finish your work. The really important thing is about the breaks, though. Those short breaks are not for doom scrolling or sleeping or doing nonsense. These are breaks to recharge you and energize you for the next chunk of working time. In the shorter 5 minutes, you can do a quick stretch, walk around the room, get a snack, things like that. In the longer 15-minute breaks, you can take a walk outside, do a short workout of some sort, read a book for a little bit, or other such things. As long as what you are doing during the breaks is re-energizing and refreshing you for the next period of working time, you're doing it correctly. There's this extension called PomoFocus, which allows you to set up the timers and you can add tasks. You can set up how many cycles you think each task is going to take, and then it just runs the timers automatically, and you will hear like little beeps that tell you when to work and when to take a break. It works great, and honestly, this method seems to work for a lot of people, so it's worth trying out. Moving on to tip number 5, which is another one that sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's like mentally coaching yourself through every little tiny action of doing the task until you have built up enough momentum to not need the mental coaching anymore. This is one I use often when I'm really, really tired. If you need to get on your laptop and finish a project, the first direction would be to move your arms and legs into a position where you can get up. Then you actually get up. Then you walk over to the chair, sit down in the chair, pick up the laptop, open the laptop, and then open up that project, and so on and so forth, until you've actually built up enough momentum to not need these silly mental directions anymore. I don't know why, but it works so well when I'm like so tired or sleep deprived or something like that. It's definitely a little more unique because it's a method I personally developed, but it's still worth trying out for sure. Tip number 6 is another tip focused on simplifying how to do the task, and that is starting with the easy stuff. Whenever I begin a homework session, I don't really always pick the most urgent task, but rather the easiest task off the list and immediately get it done. Most of the time, the easiest task on that list will only take me about 5 or so minutes to complete, and it really helps to build up momentum and get more stuff done. You feel really good about yourself, and you can pretty quickly take something off to-do lists. making yourself feel more inclined to keep going and progress towards getting the harder things done. This tip is a bit more obvious, but it still does work really effectively. Tip number 7 is having an accountability partner. Meet up with a friend and study together. Motivate each other to get stuff done and avoid distractions. Humans are naturally social creatures, so being with a person and working alongside each other can really help boost motivation. Key here is, though, you want to make sure you pick a person you will actually get work done with. If I did this with any of my close friends, I know we would just end up talking or being unproductive the entire time. So be careful about which person you pick to be your accountability partner. Whoa. On a slightly similar note, I saw this reel on Instagram of this girl saying if you ever need to lock in and study, there's this 10-hour video of a scary looking German soldier on YouTube checking in on you every so often. It seems silly, but accountability might just be what you need to motivate yourself to get work done. Another slightly basic but more powerful tip is, and also the final tip actually, is identifying your most productive hours and using them to your advantage. Understanding your peak productivity hours and using them to your advantage is honestly one of the most effective ways to beat procrastination. If you can't function beyond 10 p.m., what's the point in staying up really late and forcing yourself to do work that's ultimately going to turn out crappy? For me personally, my most productive hours tend to be 2 or 3 hours after I wake up or an hour after I do a workout. So typically from 10 a.m. to late-ish afternoon most days. My least productive times are around later in the night or right after I get home, but really late at night, 10 or 11 p.m. is also a peak productivity time for me. I tend to do a lot of homework around then. So figuring out your most productive hours and really making use of them is really going to work. I saw this reel that said this college student seemed crazy for scheduling a 7 p.m. lecture when really in her mind she was like, oh well, I can just use the earlier hours to do far more meaningful work because those are my productive hours. A 7 p.m. lecture felt like a wind down to her, and that's a perfect example of maxing out your most productive hours to do the most meaningful and most important work and using the other times to do less mentally and physically demanding tasks. Alright, so that was all I had to say for this episode. I hope at least one thing stuck with you today, because if it did, then my job has been done here. So to end off this episode today, I have a quote for you guys from Pablo Picasso. The quote goes, "Only put off until tomorrow what you are willing to die having left undone." Bye guys, rate, review, follow, and share this podcast. Please, please, please go follow me on Instagram at theglowupguidepodcast. Drink some water, and I love you all.